They laughed at her scars, the sharp, jagged marks that told stories of survival of sacrifice. But they didn't know her. They didn't know what it meant to stand through storms, to carry invisible wounds that bled in silence. She was broken, and yet more whole than any of them could ever understand. Asterisk in the bustling hall of the community center. Her presence was like a shadow against the bright, polished floors. The laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp and unforgiving. It was all directed at her. The woman stood motionless, her hands clenched tightly by her sides. She had heard it all before. The snide comments, the sideways glances, the laughter that stung like 1,000 needles. But this was different. This time, the laughter felt louder, more venomous. Her name was Evelyn. Once a soldier, a proud protector of her country. Now, she was a scarred reminder of a war that didn't just take lives, it took pieces of the soul. The people around her couldn't understand that. They couldn't see the weight she carried. They didn't see the battles fought in the dark, the tears shed when no one was looking. They just saw the scars. The same ones they laughed at. But she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. Years ago, Evelyn had been just another soldier, eager to serve. The warmth of her uniform and the promise of protecting her country filled her heart with pride. She had made friends in those days, comrades whose laughter and strength kept her grounded. Together, they had faced the horrors of combat, the smell of burning debris, the distant echo of explosions, the taste of dust and blood. It all became part of her. But there was one day that stood out. One day that changed everything. A day that cost her everything. The attack had come without warning. A routine patrol, or so they thought. She could still hear the crackle of gunfire, the screams of the fallen. The blast that had thrown her to the ground, its force tearing through her body, leaving nothing but pain and silence. When the dust settled, she had been alone. Her squad mates were gone, and her body forever altered. Her face, once soft and unmarked, now bore the brutal reminders of that day. She had survived, but the scars would stay. Not just on her skin, but deep within her, woven into the very fabric of who she was. Evelyn had spent months in recovery, piecing herself back together, both physically and emotionally. The world outside seemed to move on while she remained trapped in a cycle of healing. She had returned home, but home didn't feel the same. There were no welcome parades. No, thank you for your service banners. Instead, there were whispers. People turned their faces when they saw her, unsure of how to look at a woman whose beauty had been taken and replaced with reminders of a world they couldn't even begin to understand. And so, she remained silent. She walked through life, carrying her invisible burden, not wanting to draw attention to the pain she still carried. She refused to let her scars define her, even as others tried to use them as a weapon. But the laughter in the community hall today, it was different. It was too much. The crowd, gathered for some ceremony or another, had begun to mock her. They didn't understand that those marks on her skin were not a weakness. They didn't know that every line was a story of survival, of bravery, of sacrifice. She stood there, feeling the eyes of strangers burning into her, but her silence was all she had. And then, just as the laughter reached its peak, something shifted in the room. A figure stepped forward, tall, worn, but with an undeniable presence dotted. Was a man, a veteran, someone who had seen things that most couldn't fathom. His face was as scarred as Evelyn's, though in a different way. He stepped into the light, his eyes locking with hers. No words were spoken, but the connection was. Immediate. The room went silent. The laughter ceased, and a new kind of tension filled the space. The man's presence was powerful, not because he shouted or demanded attention, but because he stood in quiet defiance of what the world expected of him. He wasn't here to make noise. He was here to make a stand. In that moment, Evelyn realized something that would change everything for her. It wasn't the scars that defined her, nor was it the laughter or the whispers. It was the quiet strength in every step she had taken since that day, the strength to carry on, to stand tall. Even when the world had tried to break her, the veteran nodded to her, a simple, silent gesture that spoke volumes. It was his way of saying that she wasn't alone, that there were others like her, silent, unyielding, and stronger than anyone realized. And the crowd? They had no choice but to feel the weight of what they had done. The laughter was replaced with a heavy, uncomfortable silence. As Evelyn turned to leave the hall, she felt a surge of something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not for her scars, but for the person she had become despite them. She wasn't a victim of her past. She was a warrior, and as the veteran stood beside her, the world seemed to finally understand. There was honor in silence, and strength in standing firm. They may have laughed at her scars, but in the end, it was her courage that spoke the loudest. Every scar has a story. Every silent warrior has a battle that's never been told. If you've ever stood in the face of mockery or judgment, know that you are not alone. Your strength is what defines you. Tell us where you're watching from. Share your thoughts on Evelyn's story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that honor the silent heroes among us.